Imagine that. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to be back with you as we gear up and welcome MLAs back to the legislature for the fall session of 2025. This Thursday, the second session of the 31st legislature will commence at 1:30 p.m. On this day, we will have an opportunity to hear a speech from the throne outlining our government's priorities for the remainder of this term. Now, before I get into what's coming this next session, I would like to take a moment to highlight the work we have done as a government over the past 2 years. First, since the first session of this legislature, when it began 2 years ago, our government has introduced and passed 55 pieces of legislation. This is no small feat and something we are very proud of. That is because each of those bills are designed to have a real impact and make life better for those who call Alberta home. To name a few, there was Bill 1, the Alberta Taxpayer Protection Amendment Act, a piece of legislation that prevents Alberta governments of today and tomorrow from increasing personal and corporate income tax rates without holding a referendum. There was Bill 18, the Provincial Priorities Act, that ensures federal tax dollars are spent in partnership with provincial tax dollars on priorities that matter to Albertans. And Bill 22, the Health Statutes Amendment Act, which started the process towards establishing 4 new health agencies that will make health care better across the province. Bill 29, the Fairness and Safety in Sport Act, which protects the rights of athletes to compete in a fair and safe sporting environment. And Bill 53, the Compassionate Intervention Act, a nation-leading piece of legislation that says every person deserves an opportunity to pursue recovery by creating a pathway for family members, medical professionals, police, or peace officers to request treatment for those whose addiction has made them a danger to themselves or others. These are just a few of the pieces of legislation that I'm choosing to highlight today, but the list goes on. Looking forward, we have a robust legislative agenda ahead of us, one that is centered on the government's priorities laid out by the Premier in her mandate letters over the past several weeks. The issues that matter most to Albertans are the issues that matter most to us. Affordability, public safety, healthcare, cutting red tape, and standing up for Albertans will once again be common themes that you will see throughout this next session. As government, we have a responsibility to provide clarity in our legislation, making it easier for Albertans to understand. That is just one of the reasons we are the best place to do business, because we care about cutting red tape, reducing the regulatory burden that hangs over the heads of many Albertans. We anticipate that this session, our government will introduce at least 15 pieces of legislation, each of which is carefully designed to fix a problem, make life better for Albertans, and keep it an incredible place to call home. Among this legislation will be the Justice Statutes Amendment Act, which brings further protection for our local elections, ensuring only those who truly care and are serious about representing a community or riding are allowed on the ballot. We will also see legislation introduced to protecting the rights and freedoms of individuals in regulated professions, ensuring they do not face undue discipline for matters unrelated to their work. The Public Safety and Emergency Services Amendment Act lays out the groundwork for the Alberta Sheriff's Police Service to have the same treatment as other police officers in Alberta, a move towards protecting Albertans from criminals with more policing across the province. Since 2019, our government has saved Albertans and Alberta businesses more than $3 billion thanks to our commitment to cutting red tape. This session, our government will introduce another Red Tape Reduction Statutes Amendment Act, building on the others passed since 2019. Included in this bill will be amending the Fair Registration Practices Amendment Act to prohibit regulatory bodies from requiring Canadian work experience to be allowed to practice in Alberta, increasing labour mobility and filling labour shortages in specific professions. There will be legislation to allow the display of citizenship markers on provincial IDs and driver's licenses, as well as amendments to the All-Season Resorts Act to clarify and streamline the approval process, supporting the development of year-round tourism in Alberta. With several other pieces of legislation planned, we anticipate a session filled with robust debate that will support Albertans and address several mandate items given to us by Albertans and our Premier. We will be unapologetic in the defense of Alberta's growth, success, and well-being. Thank you for the time, and I'm happy to turn it over to my press secretary, Hunter Barrell, to take some of your questions.
Thanks, guys. We'll start here in the room. Matt?
Minister, good to see you again. I want to ask about back to work legislation. How's that going to work, and how soon can parents expect their kids back in the classroom?
Well, I think it'd be a bit early for me to comment on that, but I think everyone would agree that kids belong in the classroom. So we'll wait and see what is necessary, but we are going to take whatever steps are needed to make sure that kids are in the classroom and getting the education they need to be successful going forward.
I hear that, but also parents like me, we're bleeding money, we're bleeding time. Like, don't you want to give us a sense of light at the end of the tunnel here?
As a parent as well, I agree with you in the sense that it's important for kids to be in the classroom, but for me to give you a timeline, I think would be imprudent.
Okay, we'll go over to Lisa here.
Just on that timeline question, the Premier has said if it's necessary, we'd be looking at the week of October 27th. But in practical terms, how quickly can a back-to-work order take effect? Like, would you be willing to, do night sittings or use time allocation to quickly pass a bill one day and have a back-to-work order go into effect immediately, or how does that work on a practical level?
Well, I think the operative word there is if necessary, and so I'm not going to wade into hypothetical waters at the moment. Again, if necessary, we'll do what is required to get kids back in the classroom. But for the moment, I wouldn't have anything else to comment on it.
Do you have a follow-up, Lisa?
Yeah, you mentioned I think it's a Justice Statutes Amendment to restrict who gets on the ballot to only people who are serious. Is that like a reaction to the longest ballot initiative that we saw during the federal election? Is it something to restrict that sort of activity?
Well, I would defer to the minister for greater detail, but I think it's important that when it comes to elections, that Albertans have a clear understanding of who's on the ballot, a clear ability to go and have a timely results that are delivered to them. So we're making sure that the ballots are clear, those who are running are genuinely serious about running for office, and so we're making appropriate changes so we meet those necessary goals. In terms of motivation, we have seen instances around the country where certain interest groups have taken upon themselves to confuse, I think, in some instances, some of the those who are going to the ballot box and creating very long ballots. But in terms of our intent, again, is to clarify the process, make it easier for people who are genuinely interested in running for office to get on the ballot and convey their message, because elections need to be very clear, and so does a candidate's interests in why they're running for office.
And we'll jump to Catherine here in the front.
Catherine Gurkowski, Alberta. The Premier and the mandate letters said of Bill 26, 27, 29 that you want to use any means necessary to get these bills through. I'm wondering, are you preparing to use the notwithstanding clause, or preparing to get it ready if necessary this fall, and if so, how many times?
Well, going back to those pieces of legislation, it was very clear to us then, as it is now, that we need to protect children, protect parents' access to information about their children, and protect athletes on the field of play. This is one of the bills I introduced myself, which was the Fairness and Safety in Sport Act. If necessary, we will use whatever legislative tools are available to us to make sure that those bills stand. It's important for us to protect the children of Alberta. We've heard this countless times. I've heard it from my own constituents. My colleagues have heard it from their constituents. The Premier hears it in many places she goes, that we are on the right track with the legislation we passed. And now, if necessary, we'll do whatever we have to do to make sure it takes effect and takes hold.
Follow-up.
This is going to be the first time the leader of His Majesty's official opposition will be in the House. It's a new session. What can we expect from the way things are run? Will there be a change in tone, a change in the way debates go, or are you pretty much going to run things the same?
You can expect more of the same from our side. We've always tried to maintain the highest level of decorum and professionalism in the chamber. The members of the opposition, they conduct themselves as they see fit. I am as interested as others are to see how the opposition leader conducts himself in the chamber and if there's a change in tone. But again, I look forward to welcoming him to the chamber as he's the newly elected member from Edmonton, Strathcona, and see what that means for the opposition, for their tone, for the way they conduct themselves, and just the general direction of the legislature. But we're not going to conduct ourselves any different. We have a job to do, and we're going to continue to get it done.
All right, we'll jump to the phones and then come back to the room if we have time. Just a reminder for on the phones, please state your name and your outlet, and we'll do one question, one follow-up. Operator, put through the first caller, please.
Your first question comes from Don Braid of Calgary Herald. Your line is already open.
Yes, Minister, regarding this legislation to somehow filter who is going to be on ballot, so the first question that arises is there any danger here that our government might do something to filter out opposition people? How can one be sure if you're going to start putting in a lot of regulations, and I presume this applies to the civic election, it's a very appropriate thing to tell us today, I guess. How do you ensure people that it has nothing to do with political parties and partisanship?
Well, again, I would defer to the minister for finer details in the legislation. But again, as a voter, I think it's important that people have been able to go to the ballot box and have a general understanding about the candidates and what they represent. We've seen instances in the past where the messages have been a little bit unclear, to say the least, and we're taking steps to bring clarity and transparency to the election process. But beyond that, I would defer to Minister Amory, as it would be his piece of legislation.
And Don, do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, I just voted, and I didn't have any problem with clarity on the ballot. I mean, there's a lot of people on the ballots and the wards and so forth that if a person pays due attention as a citizen, I just fail to see why there's some kind of great looming problem. Could you really give us a little more detail on what you're talking about with the it sounded like there was something about organizations. Are you just after frivolous people or big concentrated efforts?
Wouldn't be able to wade too much further. I would definitely say thank you for getting out and voting and fulfilling your civic duty. And I would encourage anyone watching this to get out and do the same. It's a very important process to get out and cast your ballot for municipal leaders. But again, I'm going to defer to the Minister of Justice. It's his piece of legislation. I know that he'll have immediate availability about this later when the time comes to introduce the bill, and he can give you greater detail on it.
And our second caller, operator, thanks.
Your next question comes from John Topper of Harvard Media News. Your line is already open.
Hi, John Tupper with Harvard Media News in Fort McMurray, Alberta, calling here. Since you can't give us a timeline for when legislation or back-to-work legislation will be introduced for teachers, do you know if there's any work being done to improve or update the curriculum or tools for parents? I'm asking this for my daughter. She's here as part of her social studies curriculum right now. And in her words, the curriculum online is the pits. It makes no sense, and it doesn't align with what she's been learning at school.
Well, thanks, John, for the question, and hello to your daughter who's taking a lesson in civics today. I hope you're enjoying the message you're getting here from the podium. And I would tell you to continue to pursue a career in politics, or at least in political interest. It's definitely good for everyone to be informed, so thank you for tuning in. In terms of the online curriculum, I know that the Minister of Education has gone to great lengths to ensure that kids who are out of school at the moment are able to fill that knowledge gap that would otherwise be filled in the classroom. At the moment, with kids at home, it's causing some concerns, of course, with parents who love to have their kids in the classroom, and I think that's something everyone can agree on, is kids should be in the classroom. So, timelines, I wouldn't be able to give you anything like that. What I can say is that we all agree kids should be in the classroom, and as a government, we understand that, and we're going to work towards getting them there.
Do a follow-up, John?
As a follow-up, will there be any additional supports for parents planned should this legislation take a little bit of time? I give you an example. If you try to purchase Canadian curriculum from Amazon now, what has gone from an overnight delivery is now a 9-month wait because of this teacher strike, just for books. So are there other supports that you might be working on in the event that the legislation for back to work legislation fails?
Again, I think it'd still be premature to even comment on the back to work legislation. We've said if necessary, we would use that. But the supports we have are the ones for parents at the moment that we've already outlined through the Minister of Education as kids are currently in the classroom. So that would be the extent that I could comment on that. And I wouldn't be able to comment on Amazon's delivery time.
So you're saying there's no additional supports planned then?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll jump to the next caller here on the phones.
Your next question comes from Rick Bell of Post Media. Your line is already open.
Good afternoon. I just find this whole press conference a bit funny because if it's premature to talk about this, maybe you should be talking to the Premier. She has talked at length about it and has mentioned a possible date, as has the President of the Treasury Board, Mr. Horner. So we already know that from those two individuals that next week, perhaps even on Monday, a new bill could be, if necessary, could be introduced. And I think the questions are just, how does that work? For instance, how long does it take to craft a bill? Do we have enough time between now and whenever you decide to do it? What is the bar you have to reach to have that bill put in place? How long does it take to pass in the legislature? I mean, surely you've got something to say about a bill that affects hundreds of thousands of people and has already been talked about with dates attached by both the Premier and Minister Horner.
Well, thanks for the question, Rick. And you're right. Dates have been talked about, but nothing's been finalized. So again, we go back to the operative word that, if necessary, we'll use that. In terms of legislative process, I would consult with my office and the Premier's office about the means by which we would pass that legislation. I would suspect, though, it's probably, I don't think it'd be too far off in saying the opposition would oppose such legislation vehemently. So we would have to use other tools at our disposal to get it through in a timely manner to get kids back in the classroom. So, appreciate the question, appreciate, the frustration, but for me to come up here and give you exact timelines, I don't think would be the right thing to do. The Premier has been very clear that we will use those means if necessary, and that's what I'm here to comment on. So as the House Leader, I'll continue to work with her office. So should, if necessary, come to fruition, then we're prepared and ready to get this thing done so we can get kids back in the classroom.
And thank you very much for that, Minister. It's more clarity. The other thing is, and I think a lot of people have made a mistake about that, but I was at the strike in 2002. People keep saying that the back to work legislation, which was implemented by Premier Fine's government, was struck down. It was not. It was an order in council to try to force teachers back that was struck down by the courts. The back to work legislation passed the legislature. Is it correct to say that there isn't any legal obstacle? Now, we're talking hypothetically, I realize, but that there is no legal obstacle standing in the way of a provincial government such as yours bringing in some sort of legislation to the floor of the legislature to require teachers to return back to the classroom, that there's no legal obstacle that you can see?
I'm not a lawyer, so and I don't even play one on TV, so I wouldn't be able to comment on the legal, but I know that if we were to require the teachers to go back to work, it would require legislation. And so should that become necessary, we will have to introduce something. But at the moment, again, the Premier has made comments, the Finance Minister has commented on what we would use to make sure kids get back in the classroom. So, Rick, and actually a solid throwback to 2002. I actually didn't know that. But I think I was just finishing high school at the time, and so probably more concerned about matters in the basketball court than what was happening. But I can also say that we are very concerned about getting kids back in the classroom, so we'll use whatever means are necessary. Long answer to your short question.
All right, we'll just jump back into the room and take one last question before wrapping up. So just go ahead.
Emily Williams with CBC Edmonton. You spoke about using any means necessary. I'm wondering, does the government plan to use the notwithstanding clause to prevent teachers from challenging back-to-work legislation in court, and if so, why?
So we have a cabinet meeting in the next 24 hours. We're going to discuss all the means that we have available to us to getting kids back in the classroom at that time. Beyond that, and beyond what the Premier and the Minister of Finance has said, I'm not going to really comment too much further. Everyone's asked a lot of questions about this, and I'm clearly deliberately sparse on details because, it's not necessarily prudent for me to comment in great detail, both as a Labor Minister, but also as a member of Executive Council who's going through the process with my colleagues. So I'll leave it at that.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah. I'm wondering if is any legislation coming to put tighter regulation on career colleges, and if so, what is prompting that bill?
Could you elaborate a little more on what you're driving at?
Yeah, my understanding is there are career colleges that potentially the government could consider regulating further, and I'm just wondering if we could expect that in this session.
Nothing that I can think of at the moment. Looking through, we have at least 15 pieces of legislation, but, in this press conference, I've outlined 6, 7 of them. But I can say that we are very interested in making sure that post-secondaries are preparing Alberta's labor force for what comes next. And so we're working with all the post-secondaries on their curriculum, working with the business community to ensure that students graduating have the skills to meet the workforce demands coming next. And as the Labor Minister and as the Jobs, Economy, Trade, Immigration Minister, this is something we were keenly focused on. So I have a pretty wide range of responsibilities that wait in other ministries when it comes to colleges and universities, working with them. But again, long answer, short question. Don't have anything specifically coming on career colleges, but we do see the need to continue to work with post-secondaries to advance Alberta's interests in the labor market.
Is there a possibility that you'd write the back-to-work legislation such that it would take effect upon first reading as opposed to upon proclamation or royal assent to get around the opposition saying they want to fight it?
I think I've gone into about as much detail as I can about back-to-work legislation.
All right. Thanks for that bonus question, Catherine. We'll wrap it up today. Thanks, everyone. See you Thursday.
Thanks, everyone.